Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, welcome today to a new tribune of the Institute of European Studies. So we are very glad that in cooperation with our dear colleagues from the French Institute in Serbia to present and welcome Professor David Djaîz to our institute. So the format of the tribune is, as always, I will say a few words to introduce our guests, then I will give the floor to our director for the welcoming speech, and then Professor Djaiz will give his lecture, and then we'll have a Q&A session. So we are, as always, expecting a lively discussion, so feel free to ask questions. And now a few words about our guests. So David Djaiz is a professor at the Faculty of Political Science in Paris. He was born in 1990 in Agen in the southeast of France. He was a graduate of École Normale supérieure and l'École Nationale d'Administration, two prestigious French higher education institutions that have produced over 50 Nobel laureates, as well as several prime ministers and ministers of the French Republic. Djaiz worked at the Ministry of Finance and was the director of the Agency for Territorial Cohesion. He's an author of several books, such as, now I'm just saying in English translation, so please excuse me if translation is not 100% correct. There Will Be No Civil War from 2017, Slow Democracy from 2019, the New French Model from 2021, but we must also especially mention his 2019 book, How to Master Globalization and Take Back Control of Our Destiny, for which he received prestigious national accolades. Besides his scientific and publishing work, Professor Djaiz is also a prominent French essayist and analyst of international and European relations who frequently appears in French electronic and print media. So we are really truly honored to have such renowned guests at our institution, and I now pass the floor to our director, Dr. Slobodan ЗЕЧЕВИси.
Good morning, everybody. It is a great pleasure for me to have David Djaiz, one of the most talented young French intellectuals today in the Institute of the European Studies. He is a very fruitful author. He wrote practically one book at 2 years or two years and a half. And you will see that his theses are very, very interesting and provocative sometimes. And also, I am also want to express my gratitude to the French Institute, who bring David here in Belgrade and in the Institute of European Studies. And also, I want to say something that I know from yesterday. David was, in fact, special advisor of the President Macron, President of the French Republic, in the questions about reform of public administrations. He also had a proposal to enter, I think you had a proposal to enter in politics, to be a deputy, but he chose to academic career, and also he's in business in the IT sector. He has his company, and he's very creative in many fields. I will show you why his theses are very interesting now, because I will ask some questions, and after that, because we don't have so many time, I propose you to also to ask some questions to David Djaiz, because after that he will go to Novi Sad. He has some other appointments in the French Cultural Center in Novi Sad, in French Institute in Novi Sad. Okay. David, my first question will be, in your book, Slow Democracy, you wrote about a return to the concept of the nation state. I think it's also in that book. You agree with me? What should be the nation state in the modern world? What is your vision?
Thank you, Slobodan. First, maybe a few words to thank you all for being here, for attending this meeting. I'm very, very happy to be here among you, and I expect a lot of questions without any taboos. So feel free to ask questions on whatever topic, and I will try to be as thought-provoking as possible. So to answer your question, I think that it's difficult to talk about the return of the nation state, given that there was no such a thing as the disappearance of the nation state. Remember, in 1945, do you know how many nation states were recognized by the newborn United Nations? Give a number. 50, exactly. And now, do you know how many nation states are officially recognized by the United Nations? Almost 200. It depends what you do with South Sudan and Kosovo. But it's 192, 194, but it's a lot. So what is going on, actually? And there is a famous French historian called Pascal Horry, who wrote a very, very interesting book 2 years ago, and I think it's already translated in English, about the nation states. We keep creating new nation states, because nation states appeared on the ruins of empires. When the Austro-Hungarian Empire disappeared, a lot of nations popped up. When the Ottoman Empire disappeared, a lot of nations popped up. When Yugoslavia, which was not an empire, but which was a confederation of nationalities and nations, was dismantled little by little, a lot of nations pop up. So we keep creating nation states all over the world. And Pascal Horry has this very, very thought-provoking stance. He says, the most globalized thing ever is nation state. So there is not such a thing as an opposition between nation states and globalization. Globalization and nation states work hand in hand. The most advanced form of globalization is a world in which nation states keep popping up. And what is the problem that we are encountering today? The problem that we are encountering today is that on several spots in the world, people are starting to criticize the nation states for not being the ideal form of political organization. And instead of nation state, they advocate another form of political organization that we thought had disappeared, which is the empire. Russia doesn't act as a nation state because the core principle of a nation state is the respect for the integrity of its neighbors and of other nation states. The war of aggression that Russia conducted in Ukraine is exactly the contrary. It's not a war that is conducted by a nation state that respects the integrity of its neighbors. It's a war that is conducted by an imperial power with an imperial desire to violate the territorial integrity of its neighbors, territorial integrity that is recognized in international treatises. And you know, in 2016, a young schoolboy asked Vladimir Putin, Mr. President, and this is a very famous televised sequence that you can watch on YouTube. He asks Vladimir Putin, Mr. President, where are the borders of Russia? And you know what Vladimir Putin answered? He said, little boy, you should know that Russia has no borders. This is exactly the vision of empire. An empire has no borders. And the border of an empire is only the desire of its leaders. An empire has satellite states and keep moving as much as its vital desire expresses it, you know. And that's the core difference between nation states and empire. And the very problem we are presented with today is that on so many spots in this planet, the desire for empire and for imperialism is coming back by the window. We thought we had evacuated this in the 20th century. We thought we had said goodbye to the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. We thought we had said goodbye to the Ottoman Empire. We thought we had said goodbye to the colonial empires, because France and the United Kingdom were empires of another sort, of a colonial sort. They had colonized like other countries. We thought that the most progressive and advanced form of political organization was nation state. And what is a nation state? It's a society that can be based on either ethnicity or a political project that decides to have its limit, its borders, and to self-organize in these limits and in these borders. And apparently something has changed. Turkey, for instance, Turkey had abandoned the idea of empire by 1923 and instead had established the Republic of Turkey with Mustafa Kemal. But for 15 years we have to see that there is a new move in the Turkish power, that is neo-Ottomanism. And they have substituted neo-Ottomanism for their desire to belong to the European Union. Now what they want is to be the leader of a group of nations that are united by ethnicity, like Turkish language or Turkish languages and Turkish DNA, or Islam, rather than being organized as a nation state. Russia, I've already been talking about this, behaves like an empire. The United States of America, when they intervene in Iran with no international mandate, for obscure reasons, you know, because I understand the reason why Israel intervenes in Iran. It's a matter, I mean, they are the two enemies in the region, and since October the 7th and the terrible attacks that occurred in Israel, Israel has decided to reshape the map of the Middle East. But what the hell is the reason for the United States to intervene so massively with such a display of military power in this region and in Iran, especially when you know that President Donald Trump has opposed so fiercely Bush and Rumsfeld and all their adventurous wars, saying that it was not normal that the United States commit in wars in the Middle East and it was not the role of the United States. I don't understand the reason why they are doing that, and I think that they will pay a heavy price for this. So the problem we are presented is not that there is the return of the nation states. The problem we are presented is that there is the return of the empire, which is an archaic form of political organization.
Okay. Thank you very much for this first question. My second question will be about your book, Le Nouveau Modèle Français, the new French model. And what is the new French model in 21st century? What will it be after the foundation by General de Gaulle, the Fifth Republic? What is the new model? You know?
Well, I think that if I answer only about the French model, this will not be so interesting for you. So I will try to extrapolate what I wrote in this book for France to the European dimension and to the European condition. Well, in fact, we have to answer a first question. What is Europe? I think that there are two types of answer. The first answer is to define Europe through a common civilizational inspiration. You know, Paul Valéry, French poet and literary critic, used to say the European idea comes from three different inspirations. The Greek philosophers, the Roman builders and leaders, and Christianity. I would be tempted to add a fourth inspiration, which is the Enlightenment, both the French, the Scottish, the British, etc. Everything that has cultural value that was ever produced in Europe comes from one of these four sources of inspiration. You know, we are all, you are, I am, the sons and the daughters of Greek philosophers, Roman architecture, urbanism, government, Christianity, and the Enlightenment, the French Enlightenment or the British Enlightenment. We all come from this common matrix. But then what is extremely interesting with Europe is that Europe has something to do with diversity. We take the same ground, the same inspiration, and we do something that is slightly different from the neighbor. Look at what happened in the Italian cities in the Middle Ages. The Italian cities in the Middle Ages, they all had this common material, but they were competing against each other to demonstrate that I am better than the other one. Venice, Firenze, Florence, Rome with the Pope, Siena, Napoli, and each city had its own artistic school, its own masterpieces, its own bankers, its own way of practicing the military. You know, I have this joke, I said, in 15th century Italy, everybody was painting Madonna with the child. I don't know how you say that you know, that the Virgin and the child. You know, everybody was painting that. So the theme was the same, but there were like huge differences between the way you did this in Firenze with Botticelli and the way you did this with Il Tintoretto or with the Venetian school, you know. And this is exactly a good metaphor of Europe. Every city, look at the differences between Belgrade and Novi Sad. Every city, every nation, every culture was shaped by the same ground, but is very proud to affirm its differences and to, you know, it's like, you know this Italian sentence that says, traduttore traditore. The translator is always a traitor. Europe is about that. It's a common civilizational ground and an activity of translation, which is also betrayal, but it's a good betrayal, because when you betray, you create something new out of the common material, you know? So that's the civilizational idea of Europe. The civilizational idea of Europe that Milan Kundera was so proud of in his very famous speech in Prague, in which he contended that the true idea of Europe was in Middle Europa, was in Czech Republic, in Poland, because in these countries that were oppressed by giants such as Germany or Russia, they created a huge density of intellectuals, writers, playwrights, artists, and around nations, Poland, Latvia, Czechoslovakia, these nations were united by a language, by artists, by civilizational idea of this common ground, and this civilizational idea was the political material that helped these people resist against Stalin, against the Third Reich, and against all these huge empires that tried to oppress them, you know? So this is the living material of Europe. But then there is another idea of Europe that popped up after 1945, and that is absolutely legitimate. And what is this idea of Europe? The idea of Europe that popped up after 1945 is the idea that these nations in Europe have committed suicide to some extent. You know, remember Paul Valéry again. He said in 1919, after the First World War, European civilization has committed suicide because there were these brilliant nations that went to war and that self-sabotaged, that self-destroyed by killing all these millions of youngsters in absurd wars, you know. And so after the First World War, after the Second World War, part of the European elite didn't want this to happen again. And so they created a system in which war could be impossible. So the system, what is it? It's a system based on peace, based on the law. Law is at the epicenter of everything, like a jurisdictional construction of Europe, you know. Law is at the core and at the epicenter of everything. So they built this system, and they decided that this system had to be about law, peace, and trade, okay? So this is super interesting, but this is a very functional idea of Europe. Whereas the first idea of Europe that is more substantial and civilizational. You know, on the one hand, you have a substantial and civilizational idea of Europe. On the other hand, you have a very functional idea of Europe. And the problem is that we never succeeded in reconciling these two ideas of Europe, the substantial one and the functional one. When you see a bureaucrat from the European Commission today, you don't think about Dante or about Kafka. You think about treatises, about norms, about bureaucracy. And this worked well, actually. So let's not try to underestimate the success of Europe. This morning I was interviewed by a journalist who was trying to be a little bit provocative, telling me why would Serbia even ask for being a member of the European Union? And I took the example of Poland. Poland is beginning one of the richest countries in Europe because, thanks to his membership in the European Union, it received like billions of euros in funds that helped transform its coal industry, go to green industry, that helped Poland invest massively in infrastructure, and now it's a dazzling economy. It's one of the great powers of Europe, Poland. It's a huge success story, you know. So it's this Europe that was built on law, on trade, on technocracy was a huge success for a lot of nations. But now we are entering new times. And the new times in which we are entering, these are times of empires that are reborn, empires that are coming back by the window. These are times of war. These are times of massive uncertainty. And Europe now needs to take a new beginning. And this new beginning is the reconciliation of the substantial idea of Europe and the technical or the functional idea of Europe. And that's the reason why I think that we have to roll the dice again. We cannot be incremental anymore in the way we conceive European construction and European Union. We have to be radical and to roll the dice again and to build something new, because what we built after 1945 and what we rebuilt after 1989, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, is not sufficient anymore, and is even worse than that, is not adapted, does not fit, does not meet the requirements of the world we are evolving in. And let me tell you a few words about how Europeans are perceived by Russians, by Chinese, by Americans. Sheep. You know the animal sheep? It's sheep. Everywhere there are wolves in the forest. And there is a huge, big sheep. Everybody wants to eat sheep because the flesh is good. The flesh is so good. We've been prosperous. The flesh of the sheep is so good. My point is that Europe doesn't have to transform into a wolf, because we don't believe in wolf sheep. We are not wolves. We build Europe not to be wolves anymore. We don't want to see wolves around us. But when you have sheep, when you are sheep, and you want to protect yourself against the wolves, what do you need? You need dogs. What is a dog? A dog is it's in between the sheep and the wolf. It's an animal that belongs to civilization. It's an animal that belongs to civilization, but that is able to defend the cattle against the wolves, because it is as quick, as strong, as ferocious as the wolf, but only in defense. If you attack, I will defend. And this is exactly what we need at the moment. So why do I use this metaphor? Because it's not only about incremental change. It's about a reset. It's about a reshuffle. And you know what? I think that there is a card to play for Serbia, and that there is a card to play for Balkanic Europe in this moment. Because, you know, the beating centers and the beating hearts of Europe are not in Western Europe anymore, because people are too used to peace, to prosperity. You know, in France, when we talk about Europe, there's nobody in the room. When you write a book about Europe, no one reads it. People are like spoiled child. They have been spoiled by too many years of prosperity, of peace, and so they don't even know what is the price of war, what is the price of liberty. Whereas in Middle Europa, they paid a heavy price. They were massacred. Millions of Jews disappeared. Whereas war in Yugoslavia is still very recent. I'm always shocked when I hear a French journalist or whatever saying, "Oh, Europe is fantastic. We have not experienced war for 80 years. Do you know what the Balkans is? There was a war here 20 years ago. But people have the feeling that this is not war, that this is not Europe, that what is their feeling? There was war in Europe. War has never disappeared. So we need to take a more realistic stance. We need to give more value and more credit to Balkanic Europe, to Middle Europa, because these regions are essential to the European project, and we need to think big and to think new. And I think that this is the main message I want to convey to you. You have a huge role to play in that, and to play this huge role is not only waiting for the European membership, which is super important, and it's important to keep the pace and follow the clusters and the technical conditions and blah, blah, blah. But for researchers and intellectuals like you, there is something more important to do, which is how can I contribute to a new project and a new vision of Europe that will help reunite the technical dimension and the substantial dimension.
One more question. I think you're thinking also about Europe as a power, Europe, and also about the reform of the institution of Europe. You have some proposals. I heard yesterday something about that. What is Europe? Europe power. Europe as a power. What we need as institutional reform?
Europe is the problem of Europe, again, the tragedy of Europe in the moment we are living is that it was built not to be a power. It was built to, how can I say that? To erase any idea or any desire of power, like law, trade, peace, are ideas that were supposed to be self-sufficient and help us plunge power into oblivion, into a hole, and you dig a hole, you put the idea of power in the hole, and then you put grass and on it, and you forget about it. But the problem is that today we are attacked. We are under attack. We are under attack with Russia in Ukraine, and I mean, who can believe that Russia is only attacking Ukraine? Who can really believe that they will stop there if they succeed? I mean, talk to people in Latvia, in Estonia, in Lithuania, in Poland, in Finland, and you will find out. In Romania, and you will find out. Look at what they are doing in elections. Look at all the manipulations they are committing everywhere. So Europe is under attack. Europe is also under economic attack by China, because the massive industrial production is literally, how can I say that? We are overwhelmed by Chinese consumption goods. We are overwhelmed by Chinese cars. We are overwhelmed by Chinese batteries. And it's not only that China is an industrial power and is shipping its goods to Europe. No, it's a deliberate strategy that accelerated after COVID, which we called overproduction. They overproduce so that they strangle all other industrial powers. And now Germany, which is the great industrial power in Europe, is at risk of disappearing. The industrial basis of Germany is at risk of disappearing in the pharmaceuticals, in chemicals, in car and automotive industry, in huge sectors. So you have to be super realistic about what's going on at the moment. So if you're under attack, what do? You need to defend yourself. And the problem is that at the constitution of Europe is completely ignorant of the idea of power. So we need to speak the language of power. And speaking the language of power, it's not being aggressive for no reason or killing people or whatever. It's just first having a realistic understanding of the world, stopping with abstractions and idealism and be more realistic. Because people we are facing, they are super realistic and super concrete. And you don't fight realistic and concrete people with ideas or with abstractions. You fight them with concrete and realistic approaches. So we need to be more realistic, more concrete. And what is it? And this is where the figure of General de Gaulle is interesting. General de Gaulle had theorized the idea of independence. He was not an enemy of the United States, but he said France cannot be a colony or a protectorate of the United States, so we need to be independent. It doesn't mean that we are not allies. He was always an ally of the United States. He always participated in NATO, but he decided in 1966 to withdraw from the integrated command of NATO. What does that mean? That means that NATO can be interesting if and only if it's a pluralistic alliance and not something that is completely dominated. NATO doesn't have to be the Pact of Warsaw, okay? And the problem with Trump is not that he doesn't believe in NATO. The problem with Trump is that he believes that NATO has to be a new Pact of Warsaw. And you know why? Because Trump is under influence with Putin's political model. This is also something really new at the moment. In the past, Europe was used to export its political models to the world: democracy, capitalism, state of law. Now it's completely different. It's that other models, such as Putin, which is Oriental autocracy, I call this Oriental despotism. This model is super seducing for a lot of people everywhere in the world. And Trump, he's very honest about that. He's fascinated by Putin. Trump's really like this idea of crony capitalism, this idea that the parliament has not to be respected, that you can give massive construction contracts to your friends, blah, blah, blah. This is something that Trump loves, and he's very on. At least we can credit Trump with something, is that he says what he thinks, you know, and he keeps saying, well, this is the way I view the world. So he's super influenced by Putin. And you know that Putin's closest advisor, Dugin, used to say, we were very strong in the 2000s because we exported this political model to a lot of countries in the world. This model made a lot of children, had a lot of children everywhere in the world, you know. So the problem is, what is the problem? The problem is that we need to defend ourselves, and to defend ourselves, we need to recover our independence. And this is very concrete, because independence, it's about energy. How do we stop importing so much fossil fuel energy, especially from the United States? Because since the war in Ukraine, we are exported the natural liquefied gas, NLG, in huge quantities from the United States. How do we recover our technological independence? That's a very important one. Why? Because today, the economy and the daily life, look at you. You are all looking at your telephones. The economy, the daily life is about technology, okay? Where does this technology come from? 99% from United States or China. You know the cloud? Everything, all the operations of the companies are not now operated at a distance in public clouds. 90% of the business of the cloud is operated by 3 American companies: Google, Amazon, and Microsoft. It means that they have the kill switch. If they want to stop your activity, they just turn the button off. Okay? Do we want to be that? Do we want to be that? We don't want to be that. So the new political project that we have to build in Europe is very simplistic in a way. In politics, you know, it's exactly the contrary of research. In politics, if you want to succeed, you need simplistic ideas. If you get too sophisticated, especially in our times of social media and very polarized opinions, if you get too sophisticated, you can be sure that you will be swept away, okay? So the idea is very simplistic. It's about regaining concretely our independence. It is energy, it is technology, and it is defense. That's all we need to do.
Yes, you have also some concept of the European defense. I think yesterday also we mentioned something like about how to split the production in Europe and the organization of the European defense.
Yeah, regarding defense, I think that President Macron made a very important speech 10 days ago. I don't know if you heard about it, but he said, like, I offer nuclear dissuasion to my allies in Europe, which means that concretely nuclear material be it in the submarines or in the planes, can be spread all over Europe, in Poland or in Germany. And if Germany and Poland is under attack, it means that we can shoot nuclear missiles from the territory of Germany or from the territory of Poland. So what is the consequence of that? It's a huge consequence, and I was surprised that there was so little comments upon that. It means that, because usually nuclear power is really at the core of French sovereignty. I mean, if France is under attack, we shoot missiles and we answer, and we respond. But if Poland is under attack, will we respond? It's not clear, you know, and it's in the very interest of the nuclear dissuasion doctrine not to be that clear about what we call the vital interest, okay? What is the vital interest of France? Is European Union the vital interest of France? Everybody thinks that it is, and that's the reason why Putin will never attack a country that is a member of the European Union. He will never test that. He attacks Ukraine because Ukraine is not a member of neither NATO nor the European Union. But if he attacks a country that is a member of the European Union, then he attacks the vital interest of France, because France participates in the European Union. So this announcement by Macron has huge consequences, because if you put some nuclear missiles on other territories, it strengthens a little bit more this idea of solidarity in vital interests. I hope you get that. So my idea basically is that if we want to roll the dice again and to relaunch something powerful in Europe, every country and every region has to act exactly the way France acted, and to say, what is my treasure? What is the core component that I could share with Europe to defend Europe or to build this independence? Germany has an industrial basis, and Germany also is investing $100 billion every year in its defense systems since the war in Ukraine. By the way, there are lots of people in France that are not so happy about that, because, you know, when Germany starts investing so much in defense, you know, they are so, you know the sentence, I think it's Mitterrand who said, I love Germany so much that I prefer when there are two Germanys. I prefer when there are two. J'aime tellement l'Allemagne que je préfère quand il y en a deux. And you know, but I think that this is a necessity at the moment, that everyone goes in an introspection and thinks about, what is my treasury? What is the core component that I can bring on the table and say, well, let's share this, because it's about our independence and about future. I think that France did its fair share with the nuclear dissuasion, which is a really important, probably like the umbrella in terms of security, so it's probably the most important component. But I think that other countries should do the same. And let's talk about it. It's concrete, and it's a way to, you know, because the problem with the European Commission is always about directives and rules and writing law. We don't need law at the moment. We don't need lawmakers. We need engineers, we need the military, we need concrete things, you know. And let's start this discussion, because I think that this is a new way to build Europe on concrete basis.
Okay, maybe just another question. It will be my last question. After that, it will be your turn. But the question of enlargement of the European Union, and you spoke to me yesterday, you told me something about the dangers that getting Serbia to be too long a candidate without membership in the European Union. And you compare that to Turkey also. And,
I know it's not very popular, this comparison in Serbia. I mean, I know it's not very popular to compare Serbia to Turkey, because it's not two big friends. But, you know, why did I do this comparison? It's because, you know, Turkey, people in Turkey in the 90s, they were super eager to get the EU membership, and even the political party of Erdogan, which is still in power, by the way, 25 years later, which is called the AKP, which is a moderate Islamist party. By the way, the doctrine of the party changed because at the end of the 90s, like everybody changes, you know, Orban changed also, you know, Orban was a liberal, anti-communist, blah, 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 anti-autocracy, and now he's different. But Erdogan, by the end of the 90s, he was a very strong advocate of the EU membership. And you know what happened? EU kept adding new conditions, new technicalities. There were rounds of negotiations, but you know, the problem is that the technocrats are conducting rounds of negotiations, but the politicians, especially after the 2005 referendum, they perfectly knew that such a membership would never occur. This is super hypocritical, to carry on the negotiations while you know that the membership will not happen in this institutional configuration. This is completely hypocritical. I'm talking about Turkey. I'm not talking about Serbia, because Serbia, I think that the membership will come. But I will say a few words on that later. But what happened to Turkey is that bitterness replaced enthusiasm, you know, and they got super bitter because they had the feeling that they were negotiating and doing some reforms and working hard to get to the standards that would allow them maybe one day to be member of the European Union. And they had the feeling that they were disdained by politicians in France or in Germany who slammed the door, you know. You remember when Sarkozy, he went on TV and he said, Turkey will never be a member of the European Union. That was super arrogant. And that was a real, it hurt the Turkish feeling. And you know, they completely shifted their geopolitics after that. They stopped looking at the European Union and they started looking at the Islamic nations and Turkish language nations. So they started a new geopolitical project called Neo-Ottomanism, based on ethnicity, rather than a geopolitical project based on the shared principles, you know. And this is exactly what I don't want to happen for Serbia. You know, if Serbia is going to wait too long to be a member of the European Union, you know, there will be a development of some bitterness in the public opinion and among the politicians, and the politicians may be tempted at some point to substitute the European project for another project, maybe a project that is based on religion, orthodox religion, or maybe a project that is based on the Slavic ethnicity. And what is this project? This is the model I've been talking prior in my speech. This is the model embodied by Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin is super happy if Serbia is waiting too long to belong to the European Union, because he can sell his model in Serbia. Serbia is a key asset for Vladimir Putin to expand and to export his model in the heart of Europe, you know. So the thing is, the institutional design of European Union today is broken. I mean, it's not working to have like 28 member states, each one having a veto. The system of selection of commissioners, you know, you have like excellent commissioners and very bad commissioners because some countries are sending like very, very incompetent people. All this is broken. So we need to rethink how Europe can work institutionally. And I'm a true believer. I'm like de Gaulle. I believe that Europe is from Lisbon to St. Petersburg. So this is Europe. Europe is a continent. And in this continent, you have like poles of influence. You have Latin countries, you have the Balkans, you have Middle Europa, you have Nordic countries, and we all have to work together and to find solutions together. So maybe tomorrow you can have a continent, and you have subcontinents, you know, and you can have decisions that are taken based on colleges of nations for each region. I mean, there are lots of hypothesis. I've not been working I've not achieved the work on that, but I think that we need to be more inventive, but we must absolutely stop desperating people like Serbians who are like naturally, I mean, it's the heart of Europe. Balkanic Europe is the heart of Europe, just like Middle Europa is the heart of Europe. And you know what? I think it's the heart of Europe. Maybe it's marginal on the geographic side, because it's the borders of Europe and other spaces, it's just like Middle Europa, between Europe and Russia. But it's the heart, it's the beating heart of Europe, because there is enthusiasm, there is desire. The youth wants to belong to Europe, because it's a living idea. Whereas, unfortunately, in Western Europe, it's a dead idea. Europe is a dead body. So if we want to rejuvenate the European project, we need to work with these societies and with these youths and with these countries in which Europe is a living idea. But if we don't want to cast desperation, we need to revise completely the craftsmanship of Europe, the way we fabricate Europe. Because if you have these negotiations that are conducted by bureaucrats, cluster 1, cluster 2, blah, 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 yes, 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 and then you have the politicians that hypocritically slam the door, this will only trigger bitterness, disappointment, and there will be bad consequences for everybody.
Professor, for such inspiring lesson. And if I may just say that in Serbian academic community, we are very much acquainted with the works of your colleague, renowned sociologist and anthropologist, Professor Emanuel Todd, whose works are very much published here, translated. And you are probably all acquainted with his positions and worldviews and what he has to say on nation state, civilization, Europe. So to hear such kind of, if I may say, a polar opposite views is very much enriching and enhancing for our understanding of France, of Europe, and I think it's a perfect way that we can actually discuss and understand the matter. So please, dear guests, if you have any questions, we will now take them, and feel free to ask. Yes, we will go like this. First of all, and please don't forget to introduce yourself. So we will start with colleague Petrovic, and then we'll go with colleague Gajic, and then who also raised the hand, please? Okay, yes. Mm-hmm.
I used to be a robotics ambassador of Serbia in the EU, and we started negotiations in 2014. I agree with you concerning this comparison with Turkey. Actually, I wrote a piece, article saying that the road Belgrade is from the center going to the east. This road is called Constantinople Road, and well, we are somehow drifting towards not Turkey, because we don't have what Davutoglu called strategic depth. So we are not so strong as a country, but we are already in this situational bitterness, partially because most of people don't really know what would be our future. I would like to ask you one question that is maybe connected with your private job also, that why European economy failed so much on EIT? How it is that China started even from a lower level than Europe, maybe technologically? How it is that Americans and Chinese are dominating so much, and Europe is not able to catch up?
It's an excellent question, and the answer is very simple. Europe, except for de Gaulle, has never been an innovation economy since 1945. And we've been used to very high rates of growth in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s. But this was a growth that was due to what we call in French rattrapage, the recovery. The European economy was being reconstructed and was recovering by importing American technology. Because when you recover, you can have higher rates of growth than when you innovate. You know why? Because developing factories, importing in Americans' technology is cheaper than investing billions and billions in developing your own material and your own technology. So Europe was used to being a non-innovative economy, but a recovering economy with very high rates of growth. But the problem is that now the world has changed, you know, and now we are in the middle of a complete reshuffle of the global economy with AI, especially. And if you are not able to innovate and to master AI, you will be very, very soon a degraded economy. And this is exactly what's happening with IT. So you're right to say that we've kept buying American IT because we thought that Americans were our best friends, and buying IBM or Microsoft was not a problem. You know, there is a saying which says nobody was ever fired for choosing IBM, which means that, you know, when you're an IT director in a company or in an administration, if you get Microsoft, if you get IBM, you are sure that you'll get the best quality, the best price, the best performance. But hence, there is a problem. The problem is what? The Americans are not so much our friends anymore. And second, the prices are going up. The cloud prices, the software prices, everything is going up. And they are extorting like more and more money from the European economy. And at the same time, IT is really at the center of this industrial revolution that we are witnessing at the moment. And when an industrial revolution happens, if you not master the apparatus and the tools of production, you are transformed into a colonial economy. So you buy the innovation from other powers, America, China, and you just produce like low quality goods with the innovations that you buy elsewhere, and your economy is slightly descending, is slightly weakening, and this is exactly what is happening in Europe at the moment. So the idea of regaining technological independence, it's not only about romanticism, Gaulian romanticism, and being like free and self-determined, etc. It's also about economic realism. It's about the idea that we need to be at the center of this industrial revolution if we want to preserve our economic freedom tomorrow.
Okay. Hello. My name is Rajko Petrovic. I work here at the Institute of European Studies as a research associate. I have two questions related to your statement about the three pillars of the European civilization: Roman and Greek heritage and Christianity.
And the Enlightenment.
Yeah, the fourth one is the Enlightenment, of course. So my first question is regarding that. Do you see Russia and Russian people in general as part of European civilization? The second question is...
obviously it's the toughest question. I mean, he's just asked the...
Yeah, okay. And the second one is, what about growing non-European population inside the European Union, particularly Muslim one, because as former Prime Minister of Germany, Angela Merkel, have said, the project of creating a multicultural Europe has failed. So how do you see potential of their integration, or are they the factor of destabilization of Europe at this moment? That's it, thank you.
Two excellent questions. I think that I have a disagreement with De Gaulle. De Gaulle contended that Russia was really part of Europe. Geographically, is Russia part of Europe? You know the very famous Russian geographer called Tatishchev. Tatishchev contended that the border of Europe was Ural. You know, Ural, like the mountains. Yeah, but Ural, you know, when you go to Russia, Ural, you know, between St. Petersburg and Ural, what's the proportion of the Russian territory that is covered by this area between St. Petersburg and Ural? It's 8% of the Russian territory. So what does it mean? It means that the origin of their nation. Exactly. So my point is that geographically, most of Russia today lies in Asia. Okay, first. Second, Russia, obviously, such as Ukraine, such as Serbia, comes from the matrix that I have mentioned, but it comes from Greek philosophy, Roman Empire, and Christianity. But what is the role of the Enlightenment in the Russian political thought? Russia has undergone series of tyrannies. The Tsars were tyrants. Then there was communist Leninism and Stalinism, tyranny. And now what is happening in Russia? Autocracy. So, of course, there was an intellectual class in Russia that was completely, and even the Tsars like Catherine II, French-speaking, seduced by the Enlightenment, inviting musicians, inviting composers, inviting playwrights, etc. And there was this very, very bright intellectual life. But you know what? This is the difference between culture and civilization, you know? In fact, you know, there is this maybe we don't have so much time to develop on that, but it's super important. There is this very important book that was written by Norbert Elias. You know Norbert Elias, the sociologist? His last book, Decivilization, but his last book is called The Germans. It's a non-finished book, but it's a very important book, 600 pages, so I recommend that you read it during your summer holidays. And you know, in the preface of his book, he says, it's the book that I've always wanted to write, because, you know, this book is sociology as applied to the tragedy of the 20th century. And he was a German and a Jew. And he says in the preface of this book, I wanted to write this book to understand why my people did this to my people. Why the Germans massacred the Jews, because everybody was completely sure that in 20th century Europe, Germany was one of the brightest, one of the most civilized countries, with a lot of playwrights, with a lot of composers. It's exactly the same with Russia when we say, but there is Dostoevsky and Gogol and Tolstoy and Pushkin and etc. and Rachmaninoff, and of course there is. But what is the difference? The difference, and this is exactly what Norbert Elias says about the Germans, but I can say it about the Russians too, is that they have this intellectual class that constitutes the Russian civilization, that is super brilliant and that owes a lot to the Enlightenment and that even participated in the Enlightenment. But we need to think as sociologists and not only as readers. And when you think as a sociologist, you can see that the Russian society never experienced modernization, industrialization, with the bourgeoisie at the core social class that was leading the change. And this is exactly what Elias says about Germany. Elias says about Germany, the problem of Germany is that you had an elite intellectual elite class that was super refined and sophisticated, but the problem of this country is that the leadership of the country, even during the industrialization, was in the hands of the Junkers, of the aristocracy from Prussia. And what was at the core of this class? Violence was at the core of this class. You know, for instance, the German students, they belonged to fraternities and they kept fighting against each other. You remember Heydrich, who was the head of Czechoslovakia at a moment. He had two huge scars, and these scars were the traces, I don't know how you say that, of fights during his studies. So what Elias wants to say, that you can have a brilliant and sophisticated intellectual class, but if your society has not developed around the bourgeoisie that is really the social class that brings like social peace, trade, you know, what I was saying about Europe, you know, social peace, trade, politeness, civilization. You have a bright culture, but you are not a civilized country, you know. And this is exactly the problem we are encountering with Russia. They have a European-centric culture in their intellectual references, but their social development was not that of a European modernized country. Their social development is more like an Asian country, you know? And so the problem with Russia, I'm not saying Russia is or is not. It's not. There is no such a thing as an essence, you know? But it's a matter of choice. Where do the Russians want to go? I have the feeling that they have chosen already. They have chosen, and they have chosen for an autocratic mode of development and of government. What is more interesting, I'm more interested in Serbia, because I think that Serbia in the following years will have to choose. Serbia will have to choose. Hungary has to choose in the following years. These are more interesting countries. I think that Russia has chosen. Russia is going through another path. And again, I'm not lecturing. I'm trying, you heard me, I'm super realistic. I'm a realistic intellectual. I'm not trying to lecture over the supremacy of Western models, etc. Russia is following a path. Russia is following a model. Russia is offering a model. Europe should offer a model. The problem is that Europe is not offering a model. Europe can redevelop a very strong model, and I think that Europe in this world of wolves can develop a super attractive model for lots of people in the world who want to escape this jungle, who want a garden rather than a jungle. But the problem is that Europe is not strong enough and is not proud enough to offer this model. But the thing is that Serbia will have to choose between the model that the Russians are offering, and they are very plain. They are like Trump. They are very plain in the way they offer this model, and the model that Europe should have the courage to offer. These are two paths. You cannot follow the two paths. You have to choose. And again, I'm talking about political models. I'm not talking about friendship. I mean, we can be friends with the Russians, with Europeans. And by the way, I hope that when this horrible war in Ukraine is over, Europe will be able to develop bonds and links with Russia, which is a great country with great people. It's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about models.
The second question about minorities.
It's a very it's a very tough and good question. I think that part of the reason why far-right parties are succeeding and are blossoming all over Europe, and this is like all over Europe, like, because at some point we thought that far-right parties were blossoming because of economic reasons only. But why the hell is far-right succeeding in Nordic countries which have very good economic results? It's because of immigration. It's because a lot of people in Europe, be they right or wrong, I'm not judging again, a lot of people in Europe think that the European leaders for the past decades have failed in handling immigration. That they have let too many people enter Europe, too many people who they think do not share our core principles and our core values, and that this is bringing changes that are not sustainable for Europe, be they right or wrong. But the thing is that you have to acknowledge this. And once again, a lot of people in Europe don't have the courage to acknowledge this and to try to handle this democratically. I mean, if you want to handle immigration democratically, I said that on French TV and I was attacked by a lot of people, although I'm a social democrat. I'm rather a social democrat, but I was attacked by a lot of people in France telling me, why are you talking about immigration, etc. But you have to talk about the problems that the people encounter and that way they feel about it. And I just said we should have a democratic debate on how many migrants you want to let in your country. How many refugees, how many professional migrants, what actions do you intend to take against illegal immigration? I mean, this is your duty when you govern a country to be able to answer these questions and to handle this as much as the rest of the policies, you know. But there are some people in Europe who think that you should not even talk about it. You should not even mention this. If you do that, well, you offer victories for far-right parties, because they come and they say, these people, they have betrayed you. They have refused to talk about what hurts, about your subjects of preoccupation. We will do it. And then you give credit and even power, eventually power, to far-right political parties just because they talk about this.
This Jan 2, 3. Okay, my name is Stevan Gajic. I also work here. You've said a lot of things, but I would like to emphasize one. You've mentioned that European Union doesn't think of itself as a power. But I would like to inform you that here in Serbia we do think of European Union as a power, and we never actually divided in our minds European Union and its military wing, NATO. Which brings us to obvious question, that is the hostility between the Serbs and NATO. And I'm not talking only about 1999, I'm talking about 1991. When newly united Germany made its first real foreign policy move, which was the illegal secession of Slovenia and Croatia from the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. Since then, European politicians have been hostile to Serbs in Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, what was left, and in the civil wars of Yugoslav secessions, be it Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, then in our southern province of Kosovo and Metohija. Again, with the dissolution of Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, it was one of Epstein's clients, Miroslav Lajčák, who was facilitating the OSCE mission that was supposed to guarantee that the referendum of secession of Montenegro was legal. It was very far from that. However, European Union expects the Serbs to be super enthusiastic today in 2026. The train that you talked about people being really fatigued with the EU accession has passed, and it has passed 19 years ago, in 2008, when most of EU countries have recognized the secession of the Albanian separatists in Kosovo and Metohija, which came after the NATO aggression. So how do you think that most of Serbs listen to the language when people say that Donetsk and Lugansk have illegally seceded from Ukraine, and that the territorial integrity of Ukraine is the holiness that we should all abide to? So another thing is that what we really hear a lot from coming from EU, which is very condescending, is that because of Putin's propaganda, Serbs are some Serbs, of course not majority is Euro enthusiastic, but some Serbs are a bit skeptic towards the European Union, as if we don't have our own history with the EU. On a cultural level, I grew up on American cartoons, on Johnny Cash and punk rock, and not on Chiburaška. But there is a reason why Lithuanians who grew up on Chiburaška are anti-Russian, whereas Serbs were happy to see, for instance, now Serbs are happy to see American bases blown to pieces by Iranian rockets, as they were happy to see the resistance of Libya, Syria, Venezuela, and all the, I would say, revisionist powers. Serbs are revisionist people. I don't know who you met, the circle of people that you've met, but I will I assure you that that is only a shred of our society. This society is very much fatigued, and it is very frustrated with the, I would say, outright colonial approach of the European Union towards the Serbs. You've mentioned the economic model for EU. Okay, one more thing.
It's interesting.
All of our banking system doesn't belong to native capital. The same thing goes for foreign investment. The EU now is trying to push for the lithium project, for the German car industry, and so on and so forth. So sorry for the long discourse, and thank you for sharing your thoughts.
It's a two super interesting questions. The first thing I want to say is that I hope that you don't throw me in the same basket, because I didn't come to lecture and say you are manipulated by Putin's propaganda. I'm not saying that. I think that there are models, and these models, I'm not judging, by the way, but I think that at some point you will have to choose, and these models are are difficult to combine, and then you will have to choose based on a lot of criteria, and among these criteria there is the economy, but there are also historic and cultural dimensions, as you say. But let me tell you something about territorial integrity. I can understand what you're saying, when you see your countries shrinking like that, and foreign countries giving credit to that. But the thing is that when you have experienced that, I hope that you can understand what the Ukrainians feel at the moment. I mean, if you have experienced that in your flesh, why would you let others and other countries experience the same, especially if you have experienced that in your flesh? I think that territorial integrity should be in principle. It's not because territorial integrity has been violated that it should happen every day, the day after. I mean, especially if it's a principle, and if it's something that you have experienced in your flesh, you should be doubling down on this, you should be even more vocal about this, because you've lived that, you've been through that, So that was basically my point about.
But it is the official. Your point is the official Serbian position of the government. It's we are protecting, we are respecting the territorial integrity of Ukraine, but also we demand to our territorial integrity should be respected. It's okay. Okay, last question, please.
No, but just a word about the other question, because it's a very important question, of course. And so I think that this colonial attitude, that is the attitude of part of the European elite, has nothing to do with the reality of the situation. And that's the reason why I was advocating for rolling the dice again. My view is that Serbia has a lot to do with Europe, because Serbia is the heart of Balkanic Europe, and Balkanic Europe is one of the hearts of Europe. And you talked yesterday about the construction of the Serbian state, about the links between France and Serbia, like the civil servants, the elites. Serbia is about Christianity, is about Romanity, is about, of course, Greece, and it's also about the Enlightenment, And so we are all proud of this heritage, and I think that we have so much to build together, but I agree with you on the fact that we need to build this on radically new grounds and radically new principles, and I just hope, I know what is the Serbian opinion, I know that it's a skeptical one, on all that. I just hope that it's not too late to try and build something new based on this.
Thank you.
My name is Milan. I'm a researcher here also at the Institute.
Yeah, the sound.
Okay. Quick comment and a very practical question on a daily basis. Comment on European civilization. It has to be a more broad understanding. Civilization is something very long, centuries, thousands of years, millennia, whatever. If we allow that, like some current war, Germany, it did have like Nazi transgression period, but after 45, as a liberal, democratic, and communist Germany, it's unquestionably a part of European civilization. European civilization cannot only be a kind of liberal, democratic heritage based on enlightenment. It has to be a broader church. It's probably Christendom plus other communities in Europe that live, but well, I'm just trying to push you to think a bit broader and deeper.
I didn't say that European civilization was only about liberal and democracy, because I said it's about the Greek philosophy, the Roman Empire, the Christian matrix, which all existed centuries before the appearance of liberal democracy and the Enlightenment.
We
this
also
is exactly what
fascism,
I said.
Nazism, communism as a core, and I think generally we lack a proper concept of what European civilization is, and I don't disagree with your kind of notion. I think that is the fundamentals. The practical question on European defense. When we talk about strategic autonomy, I mean the underlying thing is strategic autonomy from the Americans.
Yeah.
This is
not only, but
this is the elephant in the room, so to speak.
Absolutely.
And there are a number of differing views in Europe on that. Poland is going to prefer American connection to any kind of European. Baltic states also would prefer American presence there to any kind of new European agreement that would be there. Do you see any practical political movement in the direction of what would I dub like European Defence Union, whether within the EU or something that EU countries build outside of the EU and try to bring it in? I think there are lots of plans, lots of talks, but do you see something substantial that would be practically achieved within the next 1 or 2 years?
I've been talking about it. What France did 10 days ago.
That's France plus.
No. That's not France. It's a massive move. It's a massive move, because if you offer nuclear dissuasion to other countries, it's the elephant in the room, to quote you. Because why are Poland and the Baltics so attached to the transatlantic alliance? Because they know that the Americans have the nuclear bombs, and in case of a conflict with Russia, Americans will protect them. But if France, who is a nuclear power also, offers its nuclear deterrence to Poland, this is a game changer, and I think that things are starting to change in Poland. You know, let me be honest, I mean, you will not repeat this after this meeting, but I think that the most problematic country today in Europe is not Poland, it's Germany. Germany is the most reluctant country to, I should not say that.
You're a specialist in French-German relations, and maybe it will be a topic here one day.
But
you can come.
You know, Poland is like Serbia. France has very ancient bonds with Poland. It's a republic. We supported them at some points. We abandoned them at others also, but they forgave us, you know, and we have a duty to protect Poland. And I think that, you know, Poland, the Baltics, they can evolve. They can evolve on the transatlantic. But the problem today is Germany. You know, they invest 100 billion euros in defense. There will be today the biggest power in defense is France, but tomorrow it will be Germany. What will this imply? What does this mean for the European development? We need to reach a deal with Germany. Germany has to evolve in its approach. It's too much pro-American today. Ursula von der Leyen, she's a German, but you saw how she behaved last summer at Trump's golf in Scotland. Like, she bowed in front of Trump and she gave him everything he wanted. We need to change this, because if we carry on this path, we will miss the opportunity. But I think that Poland is much readier to move than Germany today. It's a paradox.
With the Russian political thought and academic circles on this initiative of the Macron, the most usual comment was, well, that is all nice, this nuclear umbrella, but is Macron really ready to trade Warsaw, Tallinn or Bucharest for Paris? Because in any case of any kind of nuclear strike on Russia or response, the France will be saturated with the Russian atomic bombs. So is it France ready to trade for Warsaw, for Baltics, its existence?
It's not the way we should answer the question. I mean, it's not an appropriate question. I think that the idea that there are some nuclear missiles in Bucharest or in Warsaw means that if Russia attacks Poland, we can respond, and we can respond with missiles that will be fired from Poland.
Yes, but...
and you know, it's mutually assured destruction, so whatever the city they hit, if they hit Warsaw, if they hit Paris, or if they hit Bucharest, we will hit Moscow.
Yes, but it's not existential question for France, in a way, because it's not France targeted, but so...
Yes, but it's the concept of vital interest. What is our vital interest? There is an ambiguity. Is European Union part of the vital interest of France? We never answer this question, and we will never answer this question. But the fact that physically some missiles are present in Poland or in Bucharest can be a game changer.
Yes, thank you very much. That's actually a really interesting answer, and I would suggest, if you're not already acquainted, to listen to Sergei Karaganov. He's a Russian academic. He has very, let's say, influential, serious thoughts on that matter, and for the sake of the humanity, I think it's very much important that we have some mutual understanding from, as we from Serbia say, better always to talk and build bridges than, you know, come to the situation when there is a point of no return. So it's very good that we have frank and this kind of open discussion.
It's interesting that you say that, because I think that Serbia can also, given that Serbia has a good understanding of Europe and has a good understanding of Russia, it can be a country in which you can organize such exchanges but you know, if you want to organize these exchanges, you need to do it with serious people. And the problem is that on both sides there are propagandists, people who are not serious. I mean, for such an exchange to be interesting, you must invite serious people who really want to engage in productive talks and not in propaganda.
Thank you very much. Let's hope for the future that we will be this kind of Finland like during the Cold War, the bridge between East and the West. And with that, I would like to thank you all for participating in our Q&A session, for being here. And now the director of our institute will present a certificate to our dear guests to thank him for participation today.
Je voudrais remercier David Djaiz pour venir. Je vais dire, I would say some words in French because.
Can they understand?
But probably they will certainement, they will understand. Je voudrais remercier David Djaiz pour sa venue à l'Institut des études européennes de Belgrade. C'est la première fois qu'il est venu, mais j'espère que ce ne serait pas la dernière. Et je le remercie pour ses réponses très inspiratives pour nos chercheurs. Et je dois vous remettre, cher David, une lettre, une note de gratitude pour être ici à Belgrade, en cyrillique. Voilà. Donc ça va faire un souvenir pour vous. David ide